Well, I'm here to see the Hunley, this first submarine used to attack a warship. I hope you enjoy what we find inside. To visit the Hunley, you have to make a reservation. And with this reservation, you're given a time that you will get to go and see the Hunley up close. So before your reservation time, you can look around at all the displays in the museum. And these displays range from artifacts to the story of how they found the Hunley, the conservation, how the Hunley has become a time capsule for what was going on at the time. They were able to uncover incredible artifacts and learn about the Hunley by just taking it off the ocean floor and slowly and carefully taking things out of it and examining what was there. Now I'm getting closer to my appointment time, so I'm going to just go around the museum and give you a quick idea of what you can see before and after your scheduled time to see the Hunley up close. Okay, they have an interactive map here, and we'll start off with landmarks in Charleston. Magnolia Cemetery, Battery Street, the Hunley Journey. This is the first sinking. Here is the second sinking. Here's the final mission. Now let's look at Charleston naval activity. Here's the Hunley attack. It left Battery Marshall and went out to attack its target. Blockade runners. Ironclad sortie. Union attacks. Here's the ironclad attack. And the barge attack. As you walk around, you will notice that they have two mock-ups of the Hunley that you can get inside and use. This one has a clear side on it so you can see into it. But notice that it's been closed because of the COVID epidemic. They also have descriptions on the wall with theories of what happened, why the crew did not return from their voyage. Here is the other mock-up, and as you can see, if you looked inside of it, that they didn't have much room in there. And right before I'm ready to go see the Hunley, I'm taking a look at the crew. Now they've made this crew look as close as they could to the actual people that were on board the Hunley, using techniques such as a forensic science to put together the faces. Well, it's just about time for me to go on my tour up close with the Hunley.
Came to see. It is a 40-foot submarine. All that you're looking at is a 3D laser picture. That was the technology available at the time when it was brought in to this Warren Lash Conservation Center in August of 1995. Excuse me, August of 2000. So it's been here for 21 years, basically, from August. And it's encrusted, all that color, that's called concretion. Concretion is nothing more than an amalgamation of all the sea, shells, dirt, moisture, sand of the ocean floor. So basically, when the Hunley sat on the ocean floor, as I mentioned, for 131 years, it became a coral reef. Now, when you go upstairs, you'll see that same submarine. That's a 3D picture, as I said, within 2 centimeters of the actual size. You'll see the Hunley after it's been laboriously with small dental-type picks cleaned of that concretion. So take a snapshot of that in your brain, go upstairs and take a look at it, and you'll see the vast amount of difference. Well, let's go. Be careful. The normal environment that we are occupying today, it will, within a matter of months, look like this. It will basically disintegrate. That's the reason it's in the tank. The Hunley has 8 men on that tank. The captain sat up here. He had the appropriate joystick. He was responsible for the ballast in the front tank. His back crewman, first mate, was back here. He had the ballast responsibility for the back tank. 2 towers, conning tower front, conning tower rear, and then ballast tanks themselves are up front. They're about 9 feet, rear's about 9 feet. You've got 8 men occupying this space. When you do all the math collectively, each man had about 22 inches of workspace. Each man sat on the bench on one side of the submarine. Each man was responsible, if you'll see that particular crank right there, there were 8 workstations consisting of a crank. As that crank was turned, energy would go back to the propeller back here in the back, providing the Hunley its forward and backward thrust. Most of the time, depending on the ocean floor and the attributes of the sea, they could get 2 to 2.5, maybe 3 knots. That's roughly 3 miles to 5 miles an hour. They had to use the tides of Charleston. Charleston is very known for its very severe tides. We have 4, 5, and 6 knot tides. Using the tides, that allowed them to go out into the ocean to, in fact, handle their mission, and then using the tides, they had to come back. If you're not familiar with tides, tides run 6 hours out, 6 hours in, 6 hours out, 6 hours in, twice a day. So they had to be very, very aware of the tides to effectively use the tides to effectively handle their mission. The guy in the front, his name is George Dixon. George Dixon, back here, was in fact, don't look at me, you paid to see the Hunley. You want to see me? I've got 2 8x10s, a 5x7, and 6 wallets that I'll sell you for $29.95. All right, the guy in the front, George Dixon. George Dixon was in fact a military man. He had fought in the Battle of Shiloh prior to being in charge of the Hunley. During that Battle of Shiloh, George Dixon himself was leading an infantry group of Confederate soldiers into Shiloh when in fact a Federal long rifle soldier shot him with a .58 caliber bullet coming into his pants, knocking him on the ground. George immediately knew he was in trouble as his leg was now, he thought, shattered and was subject to being cut off. What's that A word? Cut off. Amputation. Somebody said amputation. Did you say appendectomy? Amputation. Back then, amputation was the cure-all. Most of the surgeons back then, if a guy was brought in who was an appendage issue, they would amputate to start the healing process. George immediately went to his legs, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my leg. 70% of amputees back in the Civil War days died. Now, conversely, 30% lived, but 70%. That was on George's brain as he fell on the ground. He reached into his pant leg to see how bad the injury was, and out of his pant leg, he pulled this $20 gold coin. Please note it's all bent. The reason it's all bent, that .58 caliber bullet, when it came flying into his pocket, did in fact meet the coin. Did in fact drive the coin up to the femur of George, and did in fact leave him with a lifetime limp. But more important, it left him with his leg. And more important still, it left him with his life. George, when he took over the Hunley, the general in charge of Charleston at that time, his name was Beauregard. He told Beauregard, I can take care of the Hunley. Now the reason that he was so emphatic, Beauregard had already had the Hunley put in service, and on 2 different occasions before it had an opportunity to do service, it sank. Those stories and those details are available downstairs, but the bottom line is the first time it sank, it was swamped by an ongoing cargo ship. The second time, Mr. Hunley, the guy that the Hunley is named after, the guy that financed it and put the Hunley together, he said, I'm going to drive this boat, you guys don't know what you're doing. He successfully drove the boat into the Fluff Mud of Charleston. All 8 men perished. First time, 5 men died, 3 got out. Second time, 8 men died. And of course, we have the 8 that died with this sinking. The 5 and the 8 are all buried and interred in Magnolia Cemetery down the road, so if you want to complete your Hunley tour, we're not associated with them, where you get no money for it. But down to Magnolia Cemetery, it's free. It's quite a nice setup. All the Manland flags and the signage is all there.
This model really gives you a good idea of where the crew was positioned in the Hunley. And then I've taken pictures of the Hunley and tried to give you an idea of where these people were inside the submarine when it sailed out on its mission. Well, I just finished the tour of the Hunley, and it had a large amount of exhibits, and I highly recommend it. All right, now I've come to Magnolia Cemetery, where the crew of the Hunley is buried. They actually have all the crews here, so I'm going to kind of let you see the graves where they now rest. Here's the first crew that died on the Hunley, and as we move across, we find the second crew that died on the Hunley. Then finally the third crew, the crew that had the successful attack but didn't make it back home. And their graves are in a nice line. If you ask me, it's pretty incredible that they have all three crews that died on the Hunley in the same place. I don't know if that would ever happen again on another submarine. Now this is really interesting. People have come here and left shells, coins, and other things on top of the tombstone. I don't think they've seen this before in Civil War cemeteries. And now I'll end this video with a moment of silence for the brave crew that sailed this submarine out into the ocean and made military history.